Last time on Elder Scrolls V.
Caption found himself wasting 5 days of his life playing Deus Ex, only to return to see that the land was in peril, and in his absence, Majin Todd has stolen yet another mod for Fallout 4. Will Caption be able to solve the sandbox dragon dilemma? Will he ever actually finish this fucking game? Will he get back all of the subscribers that he's lost? And will I stop using the shitty microphone because I'm too lazy to get the real one?
Find out now. Alright, we last left off leaving with Delphine and Esbern to go to some place called Skyhaven Temple. Now, last time I made a snide comment about this mission involving a dungeon, and to a degree I was being totally truthful, but to a degree I also misled you. This dungeon doesn't involve the normal dungeon affair, meaning that there's no enemies and just one trap to avoid. The ruin itself is unfortunately hampered by the fact that it goes on Delphine and Esbern's schedule, and they walk through the whole thing, so this mission progresses at a very, very slow rate. Once these two have finished their evening stroll, Esbern directs our attention to— oh hey look, it's the trailer thing, isn't that cool? Okay, so Esbern gives us a history lesson about the ancient blades, and about how the land was ruled over by dragons and then taken over by mortal men in a rebellion— oh my bad, I've mistaken this for the Dark Souls opening, excuse me. Okay, now in all seriousness, these two games were made way too close for one to steal from the other. I just think that the coincidence is kind of funny. Somewhere in between the history lesson, Esbern tells us that the Blades of Old used a special shout to defeat Alduin for the first time, and the player, along with Delphine, come to the conclusion that the Greybeards would probably be the people to ask about specific shouts, so we started making the trek back to their secret fortress to have a talk with them. Whiterun is in between our ruins and their ruins, so I decided to take a quick stop to perform a few errands and get some supplies for the road. Skyrim is the first Bethesda title to feature crafting as we know it today. The ever-growingly saturated grab X of Y things and make them Z formula pioneered by old-age MMOs and made immensely more popular by Minecraft's 3x3 grid system, which has made crafting a very, very popular game mechanic since its initial release date in around 2009. Bethesda, like a lot of other developers, probably caught early wind of the sales of Minecraft's incoming immense popularity and implemented a magnitude of crafting systems into Skyrim. Although admittedly, these systems take more from old-school MMOs than they do Minecraft itself. It's the basic formula we're all very much used to these days, which was technically also included in Fallout 3, but not quite in the same way, since that game was more about gathering materials to build a very specific set of equipment, whereas Skyrim has a more standardized approach where all of the game's normal equipment can be handmade. One of the things I think Skyrim does better than many other modern-day crafting games, however, is give your items an, well, as I just said, hand-made feeling, though this only personally applies to alchemy and enchanting. Alchemy gives you this by allowing you to mix potions from a variety of different materials, meaning that instead of just getting, okay, I need 4 tulips, a piece of tree bark, and 5 cherries to make a health potion, you can make a health potion out of a bunch of different things that you have lying around, as long as they, have the specific use to be able to be used in that potion. Different effects for potions can be made from different ingredients, so restoring health isn't just one thing, it can be used from a bunch of different stuff that you have lying around. And if you have a certain ingredient that you prefer to get over the other ones, you can use that to make your health potions instead, and that's kind of where the homemade aspect of that comes in. Enchanting, while not quite the same, does allow you to at least create your own enchanted gear based on a few personal touches, like using soul gems you've filled yourself and naming your weapon. Aside from that, there isn't very much to mention about the crafting in Skyrim, unfortunately. I'm not a big personal fan of crafting systems, but if this is your sort of thing, it's about as good as any other crafting system out there. It's mediocre. The only thing I'm not quite as confident about is the actual act of gathering the resources. Most of the time, I personally never made use of any kind of mining, despite it very much being a feature in the game. The mining itself, as a specific example, actually seems like maybe a little bit of an oversight, because there's never a huge amount of nodes in a single area unless it's a special case example. And most of the time, the blacksmithing shop right next to the blacksmithing tools that you're using will have a bunch of different ingots and ores that you can just buy off of them. Personally, I would have preferred if every resource for crafting came from a source that didn't involve sitting on something, pressing E, and waiting 10 seconds. Some resources are like this, namely soul gems which come from dwarven structures, and pelts from animals. And there is a very slim chance of metal bars appearing on bandits and other humanoid enemies. So gathering certain materials is more interesting than, like I said, standing on something and pressing E, but not everything. And I think that this is more interesting because it doesn't involve interacting with gameplay mechanics that kind of feel tacked on. It's all nicely wrapped up in the core gameplay of going out and killing things and looting them. But yeah, overall crafting's, it's average, it's there, and there's not much else to really say about that. Once we made it out of High Hrothgar, we questioned Eingar about the dragon ray. I mean, the new secret special shout we don't quite know about yet, you know. The conversation that follows is actually something I like. It explains a few things about his character without actually explaining them. It shows, but it doesn't tell. And it's nice to not be treated as the end-all, be-all, 100% positive karma paragon. Here's your free Ashbringer, oh righteous paladin. Good guy all of the time. Eingar eventually cools off and agrees to help us with getting the shout because he's a big man of fate and explains that the Greybeards do not actually know anything about the secret shout. He says that if anybody would know about this, it would be their leader, Parthenax, who lives on the mountain behind a smokescreen of snow that hurts you if you go near it. And also means that he's got some kind of secret or twist about him, because why else would they put this giant blizzard here? To get up to this Parthenax guy, we need to learn a different shout that will allow us to clear through the hailstorm, which involves us learning it from the Greybeards again like we did with Fus, Ro, and Da. As you can see, I've already set it up here, so let's just give it a moment. Just, gonna take a second. Any minute now? Okay, while these guys are taking care of their, whatever they got going on over here, let's go do some stuff while we wait. Well, what kind of stuff is there to do in Skyrim? Well, what do you normally do in RPGs? Oh, you already know what I'm talking about. I put it off for a while now, so let's finally tackle the side quest. Skyrim has, very much like every other Bethesda title, a physically rather large world, and as such, exploration is often an advertised and core feature of their games. Now, as to whether or not the exploration in Skyrim is good or not, I'm personally not quite sure I'm totally sold on either answer. Cause the more I thought about this, the more I started to dig myself a little hole where I had a discussion with myself about exploration in video games. What makes for good exploration, and what can be done to shake up the walking around a big place and finding stuff formula, despite that being exactly what exploration is. Now that's a topic for a different late-night pizza-fueled test of my psychosis, but compared to the average game, I'd have to say that I place my favor in Skyrim overall. If exploration is just walking around and finding stuff, then Skyrim does that quite well. Now, to be fair, Skyrim's exploration isn't all it could have potentially been. It's rather infamously vertically wait, what was that? Oh god, I think I heard a ghost. Anyway, like I was saying, Skyrim's exploration isn't all that bad. There was a lot of fun stuff to look at and explore, but unlike certain random number generators built on blatant lies pretending to be video games, the stuff you find in Skyrim's world actually has stuff for you to do in it. Weird, right? Who'd have thought that games actually have to have content? That's crazy in 2016. All very late, slightly topical jokes aside, Skyrim's exploration is good, not only because there's stuff for you to go do and find out and look at, but because there's a lot of little random encounters and events that you can find as well, and that sometimes find you. Anything from common thieves trying to steal your purse, to Imperial patrols, to events that start minor quests, or events that start major quests, bunch of drunken guys just having fun in the middle of the snow. The wealth of random encounters in Skyrim is a very big plus to the game. It is a major improvement over Fallout 3's exploitable random encounters that could be re-rolled every time you found one of the points where they spawned, and Fallout New Vegas' overall lack of any real random events. Alright, I've put this topic off for too long. Let's finally talk about the quest. Did you guys know Skyrim has player housing? Yeah, much like Oblivion and Fallout 3 before it, Skyrim has player housing. This is a feature of a now bygone age, however. Games nowadays have superseded this for a far more customizable base building system, even in Bethesda's titles. However, for the time, Skyrim did have pretty great housing on offer, especially notable for all the various containers the game let you show off your coolest gear in. It was such a popular addition that Bethesda included it in Fallout 4's base building minigame for just an extra $25. I hope a lot of people thank them for that. Okay, by now these guys must have worked out the... Okay, let's talk about quests in Skyrim. Now, I must admit, the quests have been the most daunting subject of this video because, frankly, there's a lot of them, and you have to oh, hey, look, they fixed it, sweet. After a long walk up a big hill with a lot of mist in the way, we finally meet Parthenax, who's a dragon. And you know this dragon is Parthenax because there's no red dot on your compass. Now, Parthenax's identity isn't exactly a huge surprise. I mean, you must have known there was going to be a thing with him after all the mystery and literal walls of smoke placed before him. But the real plot twist is that he's not actually that bad of a character. He's the generic old, wise, sage, Yoda type of figure, master of an ancient power that finds a main character has potential and helps them hone their skills in said ancient power. Not a new archetype by any means, but a character that suits it well. The thing I like the most about him are the things that set him apart from just being the role he fills. For example, he has an affinity for talking with people, because, dragon language and all that. And he's also kind of a philosopher of sorts. It's not deep, mind-boggling philosophy or anything, but the questions he asks are interesting because they align with a new theme of things associated with what the Greybeards are saying, putting into question if what the player is doing is actually that good of a thing. The arguments are usually kind of flimsy, however. The only one that really holds weight is Parthenax saying that we might just be clinging onto this world of ours too much, therefore preventing anything from moving forward and a new world from being born. But even that is kind of countered by the idea that the world isn't exactly ending naturally. Overall, however, this conversation with Parthenax is good. It may not be as enjoyable as what goes on with the brains in Fallout New Vegas' old world blues, while retaining much of the length, but it's not grueling by any means. And the conversation does do a couple of neat things, like having Parthenax initiate the shout with us by going through some of the dragon culture, like the Elder speaks first and we have to shout at him afterwards, and it's just neat little things that are added onto it that make it a little bit more fun than just talking at somebody. Parthenax tells us a new shout, and then explains to us that not even he knows the Dragon Wren shout, and that he can't even comprehend it since it was made by humans. In his language. He then tells us exactly what brought Alduin into this world. Turns out the old Blades, the same people that made Dragon Wren, used an Elder Scroll to send him forward in time and out of their hair. Now, I'll be totally honest, as somebody who hasn't really played all that much Elder Scrolls, I did not expect this to be a time travel story. At all. Nothing wrong with this, of course, for now. It's just a bit unexpected, is all. Which, for now, is probably a good thing. Parthenax also explains to us that this is the most the most sacred mountain in all of Skyrim, and is somehow linked to the Elder Scroll that sent Alduin forward in time. Parthenax thinks that if we bring the Elder Scroll up to the mountaintop, it'll allow us to go back in time and learn Dragon Wren from the ancient Blades. I gotta say this sure is a convoluted solution to a problem that would have been solved if the ancient Blades had been smart enough to, write down the shouts somewhere, maybe on the giant rock detailing their entire history because they sent Alduin forward in time and knew that their ancestors were gonna need this. We don't really have many other options for defeating Alduin, so Parthenax sends us on a quest to go and retrieve the Elder Scroll, and we comply. While on our way to the Elder Scroll's resting place, oh hey, I leveled up. I'm gonna have to talk about that now, aren't I? The big one. Yeah, I think I am. Alright, let's talk about Skyrim's leveling. First off, let me say that I have a multitude of problems with the way Skyrim, and to a lesser extent the other Elder Scrolls games, handle leveling. But before we get into that, let's establish a baseline of understanding about how this system works so that everyone is on an even playing field here. Skyrim's leveling system is based on increasing skill levels rather than gaining experience points. Skill level ups happen merely by using the skill associated with them, and once you level up a certain number of skills, you gain a player level, which awards you a perk point that you spend on, perks. The things I dislike about this system are many, so we're gonna have to once again turn to chopping up this argument into bite-sized chunks so everyone can actually, understand it, and it prevents it from becoming a rant. The first issue I take with Skyrim's leveling is how it allows for less overall control of your character's progression, since you cannot benefit from a skill without also leveling it up. My example for this is going to be Sneak, which is probably the most universally beneficial combat state in the game. If any player, regardless of weapon or build, successfully attacks an enemy while in stealth, they get a free critical hit for every attack that lands until they're detected, which is beneficial to literally every instance of combat you could ever be in because you're just dealing double damage. My main character for this series of videos was an archery-focused one, and as such often finds herself far away and out of the sightlines of many outdoor engagements. In such circumstances, it's incredibly beneficial for me to use stealth to try and snipe away a few critical hits on a single or group of enemies as long as I can before I'm detected. Despite having no interest in building a stealthy character, because I don't sneak through the dungeons or in cities or anything like that. Now let me set you up a hypothetical situation. Say I have 45 archery skill and want to get the level 60 archery perk that increases my damage done by 20%. Seems like a simple solution, right? By the time I get my 6 levels in archery, I'll probably be close to leveling up, and once I do, I can perfectly align when I get my perk point with when I get my 60 archery. Problem is, I can't do that, because I've been sneaking around to get those crits, and because I've been lockpicking doors and chests to make dungeons less annoying and to get more loot, and because I've been trading away all the stuff I don't need, which all raise my sneak, lockpicking, and speechcraft skills respectively, which all adversely raise my character's level bar. Because of this, I may only get to 57 archery skill before I gain my perk point, and I'm now stuck with a dilemma. I can either squat on the perk point for another 3 levels of archery, delaying its usefulness for however long that's going to take, or I can just waste it on a perk I didn't really want that much and just use the next level I get for the one I did want, which wastes some of the usefulness of this perk point forever. Not to mention that it can feel incredibly frustrating having your plan ruined because you dared to partake in mechanics that aren't strictly archery, and because you didn't feel like lugging around hundreds of pounds of useless vendor crap. Compare this to even the Fallout leveling system, where you have total control over how you progress your skills, and then choose a potential perk after that, meaning that you can get perks as soon as they're available if you allocate your skills in the right way and don't get shafted by not meeting requirements by anything outside of your own point allocation knowledge. You're totally in control of your own skills. You've got full control over your own leveling, and you don't have to arbitrarily not use mechanics to not level up faster than you intend to. Of course, I suppose overall it doesn't really matter. It's not like I have any limitations set on how many of these perk points I can get, so wasting one probably isn't all that big of a deal in the long run. That brings me to my second issue with Skyrim's leveling. It doesn't feel like it's all that big of a deal. Of all the RPGs I've ever played, Skyrim has the most lethargic, apathetic leveling up experience ever. It's rivaled only by World of Warcraft, and that's an MMORPG, or at least it was, and it has an excuse. When you level up in Skyrim, you have to go into your skills menu to choose which basic stat you want to increase by 10, then you get to use your single perk point that you can use on any perk you apply for, and then you're done. And a lot of times, it doesn't really feel like whatever you picked matters. It's not like you can run out of perk choices or anything like that. Leveling up in an RPG is supposed to be a big deal. It's supposed to mark a vast increase of power in your character, and as such, should feel that way. Skyrim's don't. The difference between any 2 levels of a character in Skyrim is 1 perk, usually some kind of percentage-based affair, and 10 points in one of the 3 major stats. The game doesn't stop its actions to let you carefully pick which feats or skills you want to upgrade. It doesn't grant you any new spells or abilities. You don't get a major increase to your damage and survivability outside of your very first level up if you choose health and or stamina, which is a 10% increase at the base stat line, which then falls off dramatically as you go on. You just shove your perk choice somewhere, if you want to shove it anywhere at all, and you move along. I actually find myself reserving level ups as an emergency health kit more than I do as an actual increase of character power because frankly it's more useful that way. Now of course I know why Skyrim's leveling is like this. I know why it's so boring and mundane. It's because you can do however many of them your schedule permits. Because there's no level cap, you can get literally every perk. The reason this is the case is because, therefore, leveling never ends. Never-ending levels give people less reason to start a new playthrough, as opposed to just chugging along on theirs. And the longer their single playthrough lasts, the more advertisable the game is. The more advertisable the game is, the more people are likely to buy it. And when people buy Bethesda games, guess who gets money? Yeah, ZeniMax. The third thing I dislike about this system is that it doesn't require the player to accomplish anything to get rewards. The reason the experience bar has maintained its dominance in RPGs for so long is because it's a good system. It only grants XP once the player has actually succeeded in doing some kind of task. Skyrim's leveling merely asks that the player attempt or participate in a task to gain levels. Instead of having to actually kill a monster, you just have to wound it, because it's based on, how many sword swings or how many arrows you hit. Instead of actually picking the lock, you just have to try to pick a lock. Even failed attempts will grant some amount of experience in lock picking. Instead of any form of actual mechanical bartering, you just have to buy and sell stuff. There's no commitment to anything. You don't actually have to achieve anything to get your rewards. Of course, the moment you mention this to someone, you usually get some gremlins crawling out of the woodwork, usually responding with the argument, "But it makes it more realistic." Which I say with a mocking tone because I think that's fucking stupid. Considering A, video games aren't just good because they're like real life, and B, this is a fucking fantasy game with dragons and cat people, and C, that argument starts to crack a little once you realize apparently making 400 iron daggers makes you proficient in Daedric and enchanted armor smithing. All of this aside, I'm at least glad there is some attempt at shaking up parts of the RPG formula that have been so ubiquitous and stagnant for the last 30-40 years. but I don't think this is even a remotely viable advancement for the genre. That also brings me to my fourth issue with this leveling system. It inherently makes it so the only way to level skills at all is to just grind them. Just by the definition of the way it handles the skill levels, you have to grind to some extent to get a lot of levels of any given skill. That grinding, of course, comes in many forms, from slapping enemies around with your weapons 1,000 times a play session to outright iron daggle crafted style repetition, where you just grind out the same thing, just craft the same thing over and over and over again just to get your skills up. Grinding is, of course, a factor in a vast majority of RPGs, but a lot of times it's optional. Skyrim, however, makes it less optional than many other games, especially if you want to play catch-up with certain skills you may have neglected using that you want to use now. I don't know how they did it, but they somehow created a system where if you're normally leveling, you don't have to pay very much attention to your skills to get them to level up naturally. And if you're trying to play catch-up with certain skills, you have to pay too much attention to them and direct all your efforts toward getting them higher. It's mind-boggling. And finally, my last issue is that there's no restrictions at all for what skills you can master. There's never any real choice you have to make with your character, no sacrifice outside of the time it takes to level or boost it. It's all accessible. Let me now stretch the boundaries of what's considered humane by comparing Skyrim's leveling to the leveling of another action RPG released in 2011, featuring dragons and a major plot role, Dark Souls. 2011 was a good year for that, apparently. Now you might be saying, are you on crack? To which I reply, not yet. But then you might ask afterwards, are you crazy? And it may seem like that, but hear me out here. These games have more similar leveling than you might have imagined. Allow me to take a moment here to list out their similarities. Both games have no hard level cap. Both games allow you to both place points into what stats you want no matter what. Both games allot you 1 point to place into a stat to improve it, and the only thing preventing you from maxing out a character is time investment. The thing is, Dark Souls does its leveling, in my opinion, far better than Skyrim's, because Dark Souls has a lot of limiting factors that places a soft level cap, not only on individual skills, but on your overall level entirely, and also has an experience system that forces you to engage in successful combat to get any souls that you need to level up. The things that make Dark Souls leveling so much more limited than Skyrim's is threefold. First off, skills after a certain threshold start producing diminishing returns, which means that any points placed into that stat after that level, usually 40, loses an immense amount of value that could otherwise have been spent beefing up another skill more efficiently, something Skyrim doesn't have. The more you level up in Dark Souls, the more expensive leveling becomes overall, no matter the level of your skill you're trying to raise. At a very high level, changing a stat from 99 to the maximum of 98, or changing a stat from 14 to 15, has the same exact soul requirement, which gets absolutely ludicrous very quickly. A problem doubled by the fact that unless you were a big PvPer in the game's heyday, which has come and gone and then some, there are only a few viable methods of acquiring huge numbers of souls, which normally force you to go into New Game Plus, which overall makes the game more difficult and locks you out of being able to connect to a certain portion of the player base. Not only that, but raising your level also locks you out of a certain percentage of the player base the higher you go, which means that you're unable to match up with other players for purposes of co-op, or to gain souls from PvP, which compounds the problem from before, where level ups have a nearly unobtainable requirement. The worst Skyrim does is make it so perk points start to slow down due to the levels slowly requiring more skill levels to obtain. But since there's infinite levels, and you can make skill points legendary and receive all your skill points, perk points, whatever you want to call them, back that you used on that skill, then you're probably not going to stop yourself from becoming proficient in almost everything you'll ever need in the game very quickly. Now, some of my critics are probably going right now, he doesn't like it because it's easier. Or more accurately, he doesn't like it because it's Bethesda, to which I respond, no. I don't like Dark Souls' system because it's harder. I like it because it forces me to be wise with my points and expects things of me. It gives me room to learn, to poke around with the stats, and to figure out how to make the most efficient character I can as a way of pushing back against the game's challenge. It allows me to better myself as a Dark Souls player, to figure things out and gain real experience I can apply to the game. Skyrim doesn't have that. Skyrim has a system whereby my character levels through a slightly more realistic system of gaining experience doing certain actions, but doesn't seem to have any room for any actual real learning about its systems. As an example, lockpicking. Why would you learn more about what makes Skyrim's lockpicking tick when you can just fail a bunch of times, get the experience, and start buying points that make it easier? Additionally, whatever happened to real experiences, to the player actually getting better at something through learning and repetition? Isn't that more realistic, more importantly, more interesting than this phony baloney skill system? Why does a game suddenly become more realistic just because it gets easier the more you play it? It shouldn't get easier the more you play it, you should become better at it because you've been playing it for so long. However, once again, like I've said maybe 4 or 5 times in this series, Skyrim is a special case example that I'll be talking about at the very end of this entire series, whenever that is. To return to the plot, however, Parthenax doesn't really know himself very much about Elder Scrolls, so we're gonna go ask Irongar where we can get one. Turns out he doesn't know either. That's fantastic. But he suggests that we can go over to the library and the Mages College to see if they know where we can get one. Once we get there, we go to the library and ask the librarian if they have one. He says if they did, they would never give it to me, and I asked him if they would give it to the Dragonborn. And without confirming with me, or even asking me, or confirming with anybody else, even if I'm the Dragonborn or not, he helps me by getting all the info they have on one. Apparently just suggesting you're the Dragonborn is a pretty big business here. Got a really fucking stupid librarian. Apparently one of these books was written by a crazy person pretending to be a writer, which is known in some circles as a poet. And he might know where we can get one of these scrolls. We go to him. Actually, you know what? All he does is send us on a quest. He sends us on a fetch quest. He tells us to go fetch a thing. He tells us to go get the scroll and to put it on like a cube. You know what sounds more interesting than talking about a quest where we go get a thing? Talking about all of the quests where we coincidentally go and get a lot of things. Okay, now first off, before I start dumping piles of negativity all over the place, let me just say that not every quest in Skyrim is bad. There are some good ones, like the faction quests. At least, you know, the faction quests that aren't Radiant, so 40% of the faction quests. And I remember this one quest with like a white stag I had to kill, that was pretty cool. But overall, after having played Oblivion and, you know, other video games, especially the new Deus Ex, I do not understand the appeal of these quests. Of all the quests I've played, and I tried to play a lot of them, I found myself doing a lot of either walking into a dungeon or fetching a thing, and oftentimes a combination of those two. Now, to be totally fair, there are a very small portion of RPGs, especially fantasy ones, that don't feature some form of questing that isn't just, go get the thing. Even the classics had stuff like this, and in more amateur projects, they are very, very common. But the amount of fetch quests in Skyrim is insane, and oftentimes quests that should in no way be either just a dungeon crawl or a fetch quest are. For example, let me bring to attention a subsect of Skyrim quests which are supposed to have some amount of importance. The Daedric Artifact quests. Now these are supposed to be some of the coolest quests in the Elder Scrolls series. They have the word artifact in them, for Christ's sake. So you expect to do a lot of really cool stuff to get them, right? Like, for example, this Dawnbreaker sword thing. It makes zombies explode. Fucking awesome. How do I get it? You run through a dungeon. You run through a dungeon and you kill a guy at the end who has a bunch of pet ghosts. And he also turns into a ghost, which is really nothing more than him getting a second health bar. Not kidding. Okay, what about this Azora's Star thing? It's apparently a soul gem that allows for an infinite number of souls to pass through it. A massively useful tool for enchanters. Where do I get that? Dungeon. Fucking surprise, am I right? Now again, not all of the Daedric quests are that bad. The Wabbajack one is pretty nifty with all the really weird stuff that happens there. But the fact that any of these supposedly important and amazing quest chains resorted to the most basic form of quest design is not a good thing. And that's not to mention all the other quests. For example, right now, right in Whiterun, I can remember at least 3 quests where I had to just go somewhere, get a thing, or a person in one case, and come back, and that was the quest. I tried specifically finding cool quests by asking people on Twitter where to look, and honest to God, the only answer I actually got was quest mods. Mods. And frankly, after 100 hours of scouring this place for stuff to do, I give up. Maybe all the best quests are just 5 levels away or something, I don't care. I've played this one playthrough for 4 times more than I did the newest Deus Ex game and found one quest I thought was cool. In Mankind Divided, I have enjoyed every quest I've done, and I've done all of the ones I've had available to me except for 2. I do not understand what people find compelling about this game's quests at all. I barely even remember half of them, because 90% of them are just going through the same linear dungeon, smacking health bars down as fast as you can with this stupid, shitty combat system. Can you tell that this game is starting to frustrate me after all this time? And that's not even to mention the cherry on the motherfucking shit cake, the Radiant quests. The actual, in my honest-to-God himself opinion, worst thing that has ever come out of Bethesda's mouth. Radiant quests are the worst quests ever. They are bad. They are designed from the ground up just to be repeatable, over and over, and they are boring. They're MMO daily grinding quests, but in a single-player RPG. And as someone who is currently playing an MMO on a daily basis, fuck daily quests, fuck Radiant quests. It's just the same quest over and over and over and over until either your game crashes. Crashes, which is very likely considering it's Skyrim, or you die. It's repetitive. There's no closure to the quest itself because it just keeps happening again and again. And this system can burn in hell for as far as I care for it. You want to hear an example of what Radiant quests have achieved in 4 years after their introduction? How about this one quest in Fallout 4, this one nifty little quest in the 4th Fallout game, the most recent game from Bethesda, where a single gang of raiders can abduct one of your settlers over and over again, even if you clear out the dungeon they're in of all of their raider friends and unlock all the doors to get to them. I'm not kidding. I am honest to God not kidding. That can actually happen. It happened to me 4 times in my initial playthrough of that game, and even if that quest did work as intended, I would just be running around and doing the same dungeon 4 times to not have my settlers taken hostage at random. Of course, running around the same dungeon over and over again isn't really very different to what I'm doing in Skyrim right now, is it? Here's the thing about the Elder Scrolls that I've noticed. The Elder Scrolls isn't really a series about role-playing, at least from Oblivion to the present. It's a medieval-ish fantasy open-ended action game where you go do missions and cool stuff happens on those missions. It's not about the tough choices or building your character's writing or anything about it. It's just about going out and having cool stuff happen on the little quests that you do. Which is fine if that's what you're going for. You can do that. You can make an open-ended action game and have it be good. But most of the time, Skyrim doesn't even have that. So many of the quests in Skyrim are just so passive. Like, okay, not everything about the questing is bad. Having a separate menu of quest objectives that you haven't started yet and have only heard about is a good idea, and it saves a lot of menu space. And the fact that you don't have a quest marker on the quests you haven't interacted yet, and the fact that some of these quests have objectives where you're supposed to go find something, which you're now not being told about because you don't have a quest marker, is a fantastic combination and something more RPGs in general need to do. But so much of the more real nit-and-gritty questing is just boring to me. And people call this gameplay loop, this constant stream of walking down corridors, slamming N1, and chugging health potions a masterpiece. That boggles my mind. It drives me crazy. Okay, with all that out of the way and all, we're finally out of topics. We've finally run out of major things I wanted to discuss for Skyrim. An hour and 40 minutes later. Except for the story, of course. And one last thing that I'm intentionally saving up for myself, that I'm going to do in the conclusory video that will be coming after this one. That's going to be the big one. That's going to be the video where we're finally going to put this thing to rest. It may not be our very next video, but it will probably be very, very soon. So hopefully between this and what I expect to be a Deus Ex review or critique, that'll be enough entertainment to hold everybody off. Until then, however, I'm once again going to have to just bid farewell. I'll see you guys next time when we finally overcome this mountain of a project.